This is Anil with a video tutorial for the Learning Lad on C programming. So in this video tutorial we're gonna see how we can pass the address of a variable to a function, and this is also called pass by reference in C. So let's begin. So in this tutorial, for the demonstration purpose, we're gonna create two variables, and we're gonna assign that variables with some values. Then we're gonna create a function which is gonna take the address of these two variables and print the values stored in the address we have passed. So first we're gonna create two variables. It's gonna be x and y, and I'm gonna assign this x with a value of 100 and y with a value of 200. So next we need to call a function and pass the address of these two variables. So before defining the function, I'm gonna prototype it. It's gonna be void. Let's call the function as display. Then as a parameters, it's gonna take the address of these two variables. That's why these parameters are gonna be the pointers to integers. That's why we're gonna specify int star and int star. So after this function prototyping, we need to define it. So after the main function, I'm gonna define my display function. It's gonna be void display, and as a parameters, it's gonna take two integer pointers. It's gonna be int star p, another one is int star q. So this p and q are the pointers, or in other words, this p and q are gonna contain the address which is passed from this main function. So in this display function, we're just going to print the value stored in the address received to these pointers. So we're gonna use the printf function, and we're gonna write %d, then add a tab, then %d. We're gonna use this star operator or value it operator. It's gonna be star p and star q. So I'm gonna save it. Now in this main function, we need to call our display function and pass the address of these two variables x and y to that function. So I'm gonna call it display, and I'm gonna pass the address of x by using %x and address of y by using %y. So save it and run it. So as you can see here, the values stored at the memory location passed to this display function are 100 and 200. That's because we have stored the value 100 and 200 in these variables x and y, and we passed the address of these two variables to the display function. So what happened here was, when we declared these two variables and assigned the values to these variables in some memory locations, that two variables were created, and these two values were stored in that memory locations. So for the demonstration purpose, we assume that the address of the variable x was 19453 and the address of the variable y was 19457. So when we called this display function and we passed the address of this variable x and y, this p and q were containing the address of this x and y. So p was containing 19453, that's the address of x, and q was containing the address of y, that was 19457. So when we printed that value using printf function, star p was indicating the value stored at the location 19453. So that was the value stored in x, that was 100. And when we use this star q, that means that the value stored in the memory location specified in this q variable, that was 19457, and the value stored in that 19457 was 200. That's why it printed 100 and 200. So now in this display function, we're gonna change the values pointed by these two address locations. That's gonna be star p equal to, let's say, 10, and star q equal to 20. So here we're not changing the values of this p and q. This p and q are containing the memory address. So we are changing the value stored in that memory address. So I'm gonna explain it, then it's gonna make sense to you. So here, when this main function passed the address of this x and y, the value stored in that x and y was 100 and 200, and in this p and q contain the address of these variables x and y. So now what we are doing is we are changing these values by using this memory address. So here star p means, okay, go to the memory location which is specified in u, that is this memory location, and change that value to 10. So it's going to be 10 now, not 100. So then star q means go to the memory location stored in this variable q and change that value to 20. So it's going to be 20 now and not 200. So that's why when we pass the address of the variables to a function, we can change the values in that variable by using the addresses. So as you can see here, this x and y values are changed here. So now I'm going to close it, and now we're going to print the value in this main function. So we're going to use a printf statement, and we're going to say before function call x is %d and y is %d. So we have to refer x comma y. I'm gonna copy this and I'm gonna paste after the function call. I'm gonna make it after function call. X was %d and y was %d. So I'm gonna save this, compile it and run it. So as you can see here, before function call x is 100 and y is 200. That's because here we are assigning the values of 100 and 200 to these variables x and y. So then we call this display function and we pass the address of these two variables to the function. So here in this display function we just printed the value which is stored in the memory location we received. That was the address of x and address of y, and the value stored in that memory addresses were 100 and 200. Then here by using that memory locations we change the value stored in that variables x and y. So when the control comes back after this display function, it just prints after function call x is 10 and y is 20. That's because the value was changed here, and that change is reflected in this main function also. So I'm gonna close it. And the next thing is was the use of passing the address of a variable to a function. So all of you know that if you use a return statement to return some value from a function, then you can return only one value at a time. But if you pass the address of a variable, then you can make changes to that variable in the called function. So the change will be reflected in the call of function also. So if you want to change the multiple values in the called function, that is in this case display function, then you can pass the address of variables to that function. So this is it. This is about pass by reference or passing the address of a variable to a function. So thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe, like my Facebook page at facebook.com/learninglad. So I see you in the next tutorial.